We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to 2014. This is Robert Phoenix, and you are listening to the Friday FARcast on Free Association Radio. Happy New Year to everyone all around the planet. 2013 was undoubted. It was a trip on so many levels and so many fronts, and the high strangeness, weirdness, synchronicities, the potential for transformation and desecration are going to be even higher in 2014, the year of the Tower. You add up 2014, you get the Tower card. No coincidence that the Freedom Tower, the One World Freedom Tower, will be opening this year. It is the return and the rise of Babel. How is everyone? I just saw somebody drop off. I lost 700 friends on Facebook. I've had my mother out here for the holidays, and my son for last week, and my mom's been pretty sick the entire time. Been spending a lot of time just taking care of her. So I've had a low profile on Facebook and just trying to. I've got a ton of planets in the 12th house too. So it's been a 12th house kind of end of 2013, coming out of 2013 with some first house action, hopefully. Saturn still transiting through my 12th until the end of the year, which is challenging on some level, because on the one hand, I am a public person. I have an 11th house show, or a show called the 11th House on Gaian TV, so I tend to be pretty public. But Saturn transiting the 12th is a very private, internal kind of transit, so it's interesting juggling two worlds at once on that front. But I hope everyone had a very suitable, appropriate, and meaningful final night of 2013. I was dog-tired and fell asleep early. I've always thought New Year's Eve was overrated anyway. I can count on a couple hands. On one hand, some good New Year's Eves. And some other real duds, real stinkers. I got into a fight one time. The last fight I ever got into, physical fight, fist fight, was on New Year's Eve. I was in high school. I was a senior in high school. It was a bad night. I was roller skating. I was on some form of intoxicant. I was at the roller skating rink. That's what we did back in the 70s. And I got thrown down by Leonard Plechta. Leonard Plechta, what a name, right? He tripped me. And I did not like it. I'm skating around, just, getting into my buzz, enjoying my buzz, and Leonard Plechta tripped me. I had no recourse but to punched Leonard Plichta. That's what I did. I punched him. I punched him in the little cafe area, and we went outside, and we rolled around the mud, got into a fight, and that's how I started my senior year in high school. Fight with Leonard Plichta. Last fight I was in. I say it was a Mexican draw, although, you see, I got my anger out with my punch. But unfortunately, I didn't knock him out. So he was more angrier than I was. And when you fight, the angry person almost always wins the fight, takes the day, carries the day. So I let out my energy. I expended my energy. I was done. I got my aggression out. Mars and Cancer, 8th house, and he was just getting going. Last physical fight I was ever in. So here we are, it's 2014. The elements at the beginning of the year are very intense. We started off with a new moon at the beginning of the year, new moon in Capricorn. We're going to have a Capricornian kind of year. I'm betting that Texas, all eyes will be on Texas in 2014 because Texas is a Capricorn sun and a Capricorn moon state. It is a country. Texas is a country unto itself. I've come to find that out. The rest of the United States is really struggling economically. Not the case here. Not even close. But of course, it's all short-term solutions with Texas because they're fracking the shit out of the landscape here. And it's not pretty. They have oil wells in suburban tract home lots. I kid you not. Okay, this is happening. So, yes, there's a lot of money here because of the oil and gas industry, but they are extracting oil and gas from places that at some point in time were not considered to be viable options. There was a community here. It was a bedroom community, a suburb community, I think, of Dallas, and they actually sued a company for extracting oil really within 100, 150, 200 feet of their homes. And this is a 24/7 operation, this oil extraction. They don't shut it down at 6 o'clock at night or 5 o'clock at night. It's 24/7. The lights are always on. The derricks are always pumping. And they lost their suit. The judge here basically said that that company, that oil company, has every right to use the land as much as the people that live there. Whatever happened to zoning? Whatever happened to zoning? This is the new America. Welcome to it. So on the one hand, we have rampant capitalism, extracting oil, extracting natural gas without any concern for the immediate area. And on the other hand, we have this out-of-control centralized government via Obamacare and any number of agencies that are more than happy to get their hands in our personal affairs and bank accounts and our daily decision-making process. So we've got the worst of both worlds. We have out-of-control crony capitalism destroying the environment and over-the-top nanny-state government telling people what to do and grabbing up whatever environment is left over for them. Well, the options aren't that great for the rest of us if these are the most viable alternatives we have. Well, welcome to 2014. In a moment or two, we're going to be joined by Mr. Robert Bonomo. He's been on the show. I think this will be his third appearance here. And we've talked about esoterica, and we've talked about global events and global affairs in Russia, where he currently is residing. And we're going to do the same today. We're going to get into Russia and probably take an esoteric turn here or there. There's a lot happening there, and it's an area of the world that we need to pay a lot of attention to. And I'm going to get into some of the astrological components of Russia as we dive deeper into this. And just to give you a timeline as to what we're talking about here, just recently there was a terrorist attack in Volgograd. This is a big deal. This is a salvo against the Russian government possibly through the Chechens. We'll get into that just to find out really who the Chechens are and who are backing the Chechens. Anytime we get into revolution, there's always somebody that has a vested interest. There's always someone who's supplying arms, who's supplying communication, who's supplying hard cash to buy people off. So this is not just a Chechen bid for independence. So we've got Chechnya on one side, we've got Ukraine on the other side, and Russia doing hard and fast deals to try to keep Ukraine under wraps. There's also, of course, the release of Mikhail Khodorkovsky, the oligarch from Yukos, who'd been in jail for 10 years, who has now been released by Putin. We're going to talk about that. And there is the Sochi Olympics coming up. And the United States, of course, in a strong signal of protest, will be sending gay athletes to the opening ceremonies. This is what it has come down to in the United States. If we don't like something somewhere, we send gay athletes. I remember back in 1980, I was sorely disappointed, but at least Jimmy Carter had the cojones to not be a participant in the 1980 Olympics because of Russia's very aggressive stance with Afghanistan. Carter pulled it out. He pulled the United States out, and we did not attend those Olympics. Now we don't do that. We just send gay athletes. All right, let's waste no further time and bring on our man of the moment all the way from Russia, the former Soviet Union. It's author and esotericist, Mr. Robert Bonomo. Hi, Robert.
Hey, how you doing, Robert? Great to talk to you.
Hey, good to talk to you. Thank you for coming on to the program. And I'm doing pretty well, getting ready to jump into 2014, even though I'm not a huge Gregorian calendar guy. It's part of the, I guess it's part of the time wave that everybody else participates in. So here we are with all the social rituals and social cues and kind of looking ahead for this next calendar year. How about you? How are you doing?
Doing real well. Here in Vietnam on the beach. Relaxing a little bit. It's nice.
So you're in Vietnam currently?
Yeah, taking a little bit of a vacation, and it's really nice.
I think Vietnam is one of those under-the-radar countries that people wanted to retire to and do it fairly affordably. That would be the place to go. Aren't they doing a lot of oil and gas stuff in Vietnam now as well?
That part I really don't know. I couldn't tell you. But as far as retirement goes, it's unbelievably inexpensive.
Yeah.
I mean, you can live here really well on about $30 a day. And that's like a hotel room. That's everything's new and eating like a king and beach. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's unfortunately very ironic that a country that we helped devastate could actually be a haven for people who have kind of the expatriate spirit or desire a place to live affordably in and spend their American dollars. So let's get into this Russia thing. We sort of got into this via email a little bit, and it started with the terror attacks and the lack of response by Putin. And I thought it would be great to have you on to sort of get some of this stuff under the microscope and kind of see where we are with it. Were you there in Russia when this went down?
No, I was actually here. It happened, right before New Year, which is in Russia extremely big holiday. Imagine Thanksgiving, Christmas all rolled into one. For them, it's the holiday, and it happened. What was it, on the 29th and the 30th? No, there was one attack, and then the next day a second one. So there was two attacks.
Right.
And I think it was pretty devastating. It was a pretty big deal.
So let me just see the date here. I've got the 31st, so it probably happened on, the 30th? Is that right?
Ah, okay, exactly. Right. On the 30th, and I believe it was the first one was on the 30th, and the second one on the 31st. It was right there, right before New Year. Two separate attacks. I mean, imagine if that had happened in the United States. Well, in a city of about 1 million people, say in a city like Philadelphia, they had 2 terrorist attacks. And it was a very big deal for them.
Yeah.
And it was serious. And it's interesting, when we had talked about this before, that meeting that Putin had with the Saudis before everything in Syria went down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting that just to, if folks haven't heard about that, there was a meeting that this was released through the Telegraph and through other newspapers, but this was released from the Russian side, that the Saudis basically threatened him in a sense, that it was, give up Syria. We'll make an international deal on petroleum. If you don't, there was a threat that they made that they controlled these people in Chechnya, at least to some extent. So when this happened, I think a lot of people immediately, their eyes were on the Saudis, like, maybe something's going to happen here. And I think the backdrop also of what's going on in Iran now is the Saudis are not happy with the United States right now.
No, not at all.
And so there's a lot of, I think it's a very complex question. And how are the Russians going to respond? I think it's interesting.
Well,
one would guess it would be somewhere in Lebanon, Syria, if they were going to respond. I would guess they could do it there because they could do it covertly, under the cover of Assad, Hezbollah, something like that. That's my guess.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the iteration of this latest attack is being linked to Islamist extremists, and they call themselves the Caucasus Caliphate. And the leader, this guy, Doku Umarov. What do you know about him?
He was the Chechen leader.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about him, but as far as I know, he had he had declared a religious war against the Olympics, against all of Russia, etc. So he, as far as I understand, is the leader of that terrorist group, of all of that group, because it's not just Chechnya, it's Dagestan and all these other places.
That's right.
It's a pretty big movement there. And there was a tie-in with the Boston Marathon folks coming from that area.
Where did he go?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. You dropped down a little bit. Yeah. You've got the Tsarnaev brothers, who of course are of Chechen descent, and that is just a completely twisted tale. And we can ask ourselves, who the hell knows what was going on there? My sense is that those guys were the fallback patsies, that there was supposed to be some other group to be blamed for what happened in Boston, and those guys were smoked out. Like, I believe that they were going to blame instead of somebody from the Caucasus, a Caucasian terrorist here in this country, and they got smoked out. And it was going to be kind of your basic white wingnut, lone nut, deranged, possibly lone shooter, loner type, and they got smoked out. So their fallback was these guys that they had in their back pockets, especially with the older brother, the older of the Tsarnaev brothers, who of course had a lot of contact with the FBI and the CIA. And so
the CIA, yes.
Yeah. FBI and CIA. They were the patsies. Those guys were the patsies. And it was Plan B, and it was very important for them to obviously kill the older Tsarnaev brother and then make the younger Zhokhar unable to speak. And very strange stuff, and we're still dealing with the reverberations of that. It's become a mini 9/11 in some ways, a collective trauma event. But yeah, we're dealing with this whole Chechnya piece, and
And their uncle, did you read about their uncle who had been married to a woman whose, I believe, her father was head of the CIA for all of that area of Central Asia?
That's right.
And after the divorce, he lived with that guy.
Yeah.
And both brothers were in a CIA-funded program back in, I believe was it in Dagestan? I'm not sure if it was in Dagestan or in Chechnya. One of these freedom summer camps funded by the CIA.
Yeah, that's right.
That thing smelled really badly.
Yeah, I'm going to look up his uncle really quickly just so we can get a name and kind of a reference point with him. Let's see. His name is, just so we can, we have so much information to go through with this stuff. Okay, now he's denying that he has any. What was interesting about the uncle was that he was on the scene like within hours after it happened, and he had almost like a prepared speech ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if
I'm trying to look. The names I get with the names, it gets really.
Ruslan Sarny or Ruslan Sarnayev. So he has a Sarnayev.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And then, so he lives in a suburb of Washington, D.C. He's in Bethesda. This guy's intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
He worked for Dick Cheney. He was a consultant in Kazakhstan. He worked with the State Department, the USAID. It was identified as a CIA front. This guy he's an inside dude all the way around, right? This is
completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's who it reminds me of in the whole JFK thing is that who's the Russian guy who always denied that he was in the CIA, who was a friend of Oswald. What's his name? He was in that circle of Oswald.
Yeah, I know
the Russian emigre circle.
Yeah. The name escapes me, but yeah, I could see the comparison here. There's another guy that's linked to this Ruslan Sarny. His name is Graham Fuller, and he's a very senior CIA official. So the uncle was married to the daughter of Graham Fuller. So there we go.
Exactly. There we go. There it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he is one of the most. Fuller is one. This is according to Global Research, which is a great website, by the way. And it says the uncle was married to the daughter of Graham Fuller, one of the most important CIA architects of using Islamic jihadist terrorists against the USSR during the Cold War and after throughout Central Asia, including Chechnya and Kazakhstan. How about that? That's their uncle.
And we're all supposed to swallow this one?
Yeah, ridiculous.
There's that woman from Boiling Frogs, Sybil Edmonds?
Yeah.
Yeah, she did a really, really interesting interview on this, and she goes pretty deep. And she made some of the connections she made were fascinating. Remember the NATO program in Europe where they left behind those groups that later became the terrorist attacks?
Yep.
In Italy? Or what was it called? It was called Operation... the name is escaping me, but it was those terrorist attacks in Italy that wound up being tied back to NATO.
Mm-hmm.
They left cells in Turkey and in Central Asia, and she says some of those cells became the active cells in Chechnya. And so you see the connection when you see those cells in Chechnya promoting the terrorist groups in Chechnya, and then it comes back through Boston. It's not pretty.
No, it's kind of like they have this operation where they it's almost like breeding cultures in a petri dish, right? They start them off, and they keep these things alive, and through covert means they encourage some form of consternation and engage in some form of training, and they entrap, in a lot of cases, they entrap these patsies and then they set them up, and then they take them down and say that all of a sudden we've just scurried a terror attack, or we've busted a cell, when they're the ones that have created the cell in the first place.
Exactly. Oh, the name, I'm sorry. The name was, let's say Operation Gladio.
Okay,
in Europe.
Right.
And that's been proven to be real. Those were NATO-funded attacks against civilians to promote anti-communist feelings. The Red Brigades in Italy. In Italy, it was really horrible, some of these attacks.
Terrible.
And later out, we find out it's not the Red Brigades, it's Operation Gladio. It comes from that same vein, some of this stuff in Central Asia.
So physically, where is Volgograd, and why did they choose Volgograd to launch this salvo against the Russian government?
Yes, Volgograd, as far as I'm not, but it's the largest Russian city before you begin to enter into the Caucasus, down near where Sochi is. Because Sochi is in a very critical point, right above, where the Caucasus begin.
Right.
So the security there is unbelievable now. I mean, I even have friends who were there who, unless they had a job and tickets to the Olympics, they were going to be sent out of the region. So you can't just go there and live, even as a Russian citizen. You have to have some serious connection to the area, or they kick you out. So the security around Sochi, I really don't think anything is going to happen in Sochi, because I think the security is just unbelievable. I think it's about 40,000 policemen there now. But this city is one of the biggest cities before you enter that critical area. So what I think happened was it was kind of a soft target. And the first attack, it actually happened outside the station. So they didn't even get through the metal detector. The woman, apparently it was a woman, before the metal detector, she detonated the explosive. So I think it was because, one, it's physically relatively close, but not inside the real hard security area. And it's a pretty big city. I think it's about 1 million people. It's the old Stalingrad.
Well, the Olympics start on February 7th, which puts it under the sign of Aquarius. And if you track any kind of revolutionary, radical, or explosive activity throughout history, I guarantee you there will be the fingerprints of Aquarius not far behind, or at least directly associated with an event or a period of time. So this should be a very interesting just astrological phase and cycle, and especially in the Soviet Union or former Soviet Union, where when Uranus was in Aries was the time that there was the Bolshevik Revolution. So there is this Aquarian-Uranian undertone that runs through at least the astrology at that point in time for Russia. And what's also interesting, Robert, is there's also the kind of the meta ritual aspect of the Olympics as well, which we saw in the opening ceremonies in London. And I don't know if you paid attention to the last Winter Olympics, which were in Vancouver. It was incredibly esoteric and really and really arcane. And so not only do we have this whole terror component, but there's also this kind of ritualistic aspect to the Olympics that is an undercurrent at the same time. It'll be interesting to see what the Russians, in conjunction with these architects of the New World Order, which is what the Olympics is about, cook up.
Yeah. No, I think it's going to be pretty potent. It's going to be strong. The message is going to be, and that line is really starting to harden, I think, between, the Russia, China, Europe, America, Japan sort of axis. The line is starting to harden, I think. So I wonder, their message, I think, is going to be pretty strong. I don't think it's going to be a soft message.
Yeah, I would agree. What do you think of Khodorkovsky being released?
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. I think it's a sign of the power that Putin feels right now. He's in such a strong position where I've heard a lot of people criticize him for it, saying, well, if the guy's, Khodorkovsky is a criminal. He's committed murder. He's done horrible things. There's every reason to keep this guy in jail forever. But I think Putin made a decision. He says, look, I'm at a very strong point. If I keep him in jail, it's going to be a thorn in my side, so I let him go. And remember, there is that sort of czarist kind of idea of letting people, showing mercy, So I think it's a show of how strong he feels. That famous story of Dostoevsky, who started out as a liberal pamphleteer. They catch him. They bring him. They're gonna execute him. And in the last moment, the horse comes with a note from the Tsar saying, no, he's pardoned. Dostoevsky became very, very czarist, So there's that Russian tradition of that, of kind of giving the pardon in the last moment.
Right.
So I think it's a sign of power, actually.
Interesting. So where will Khodorkovsky go? Will he stay in Russia, or will he go hang out with the rest of his oligarch buddies in London and try and buy a soccer?
Yeah, I think he's going to get out of Russia, and he's going to try and get some money back from Yukos.
Yeah.
Because there's some money floating around out there, and it's not clear what happened with those shares. Because the company got dissolved and absorbed into, I'm not sure if it got absorbed into Gazprom. I can't remember exactly which one it got absorbed into. But he's going to be out there looking for, to get some of his money back.
Right.
But I think it's fascinating, the promotion that he's gotten. I mean, if you read about him in the New York Times, it's like Solzhenitsyn or something.
Who's that? Khodorkovsky?
Yeah.
Well,
you see the pictures of him.
Yeah. Well, of course. Of course the New York Times would promote him and turn him into a political prisoner. That would. I mean, this is the newspaper that sold us the war in Iraq, right? So it doesn't surprise me at all.
They wanted to sell us the war in Syria.
Absolutely.
They were trying. They were pushing that thing.
Absolutely. This may offend some people, but it's my opinion that the New York Times is a front piece for the Zionists, and they're very aggressive political and economic machinations. I mean, it doesn't really get much more basic and fundamental than that, because they always seem to fall on the side of whatever Israel wants, whatever Israel needs, and they get smoked out. They got smoked out on Syria. People are far less willing to buy into their editorial since the Iraq War. I mean, they've lost so much credibility. They're no longer the same kind of newspaper they used to be. Here in the United States, there continues to be kind of a lionization, especially in what we would call the truth community, around this whole idea and image of Putin, and people believe that he is going to be the guy that could be the counter measure to Obama and Obama's socialist push here in this country. But it's fascinating to see photos of Putin hanging out with people like Chabad House and going to the Wailing Wall and wearing a yarmulke and all that stuff. And so there's really two images that exist of Putin. One is the guy that's the warrior riding the horse. Then the other is this really kind of docile, sort of maybe almost somebody who has a double identity or two sides to himself. Where do you align or fall in with this sort of bifurcated image of Putin?
I see him. Well, for example, in Moscow, when he gave that speech, I believe it was at Chabad House. He said, and I think it was fascinating what he said. He said something like, I had been a KGB officer in the Soviet Union, and remember that half of the original Politburo was of your people. What politician? When he said that, it was clear what he was saying. No, I mean that takes a lot of guts, I think, in a certain sense.
Yeah.
to come out and say that directly.
Yeah.
You know?
When I was...
so, I mean, he was basically saying, yeah, I'm at Shabbat House. Lenin, who was Jewish, was here, was one of your people. Because it's interesting, in Russia, when people talk about Jewish people, they consider them another ethnicity. They're not considered Russian.
That's right.
No, there's Chechens, there's many. They have Cossacks, this, that, and the other thing, and there's Jewish people, but they don't consider them Russian in that sense.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So he'll go, but he says what he what he has to say too. I don't think he's anybody's fool.
I don't think so either, and he is certainly going to emerge as an important figure, enigmatic, and not easily pinned down, as far as I can see. I was in Colorado a few weeks ago, and I was talking with Jay Weidner, and Jay told me that he knows someone who's actually fairly close to Putin. And Putin has this plan. This is Putin, according to this guy. Putin's grand vision is to do a brain drain from the United States of almost entirely white Americans and bring them to Russia to basically repopulate Russia with disaffected white Americans. That is part of Putin's plan. This, according to somebody that Jay Weidner knows, who is close to Putin.
Wow, that's a fascinating idea. Could he give any more details, or?
No, he couldn't give me any more details. But I'll tell you what's really interesting about that is that when you talk to people inside the truth movement, which may or may not be mostly Anglo-Saxon or Caucasian or white, whatever label you want to use, the people that I run across generally tend to be, and they almost to a person are very supportive of Putin and hold him up as an example of what a leader should be. So there is some kind of transference that's taking place here that I can see, and it's utterly fascinating. And if you look at least on a superficial level, the United States and Russia have completely flipped. Right? We've talked about this before, like the last time you were on the show, but they've completely flipped. I've got a very close friend, dear friend, who is Ukrainian and has been educating me about Ukraine and what's going on there. And they seem to be in a pretty difficult spot because they want out. And they don't. They want their own independence, just like Chechnya and some of the other places that are less discernible. And they want to hitch their wagon to the EU in order to do this. Meanwhile, Putin is doing these backdoor deals with the president of Ukraine and giving them lots of money to stay afloat financially. They seem to be in a very difficult position. What's your take on them?
Yeah, it's very in Ukraine there's Eastern Ukraine and Western Ukraine. Eastern Ukraine is very Russian. Ethnically, it's very Russian. Linguistically, it's very Russian. And there's really not a lot of support for Europe in Eastern Ukraine. In Western Ukraine, yes, there is. Say west of Kiev. West of Kiev is very Eurocentric. They speak more Ukrainian. They look towards Europe. But if you look at Ukraine as a whole, it's not so clear. Because, as I was talking to some people from Ukraine, if they join the EU, Ukrainian manufacturing is going to get destroyed within an EU environment because a lot of it now is sent to Russia. So, economically, it's not so clear that it's a great idea for Ukraine economically. Politically, it's a completely different political environment. A European political environment is completely different than a Russian one. It's the Russian political environment. You have one party and one ruler, and that's basically it. In Europe, you have a whole different system. So who do they go with? Who would be a better idea for them? I think it's very difficult. I think it really depends on ethnicity too, within Ukraine. If you feel more Russian or if you feel more kind of Polish, European.
Yeah. Well, if they manage to extricate themselves from Russia, which I don't think is going to happen in the near future, but if they did, and they managed to join up with the EU, then they would basically become a satellite of the World Bank. And
exactly.
And that's a whole other kind of, sort of conscripted indentured servitude, right?
I mean, I lived in Spain for many years. I lived in Spain in that period when they joined, when the euro came in, the late 90s. It was,
right.
It was a fabulous time. People were like, "Wow, we're Europeans. We have euro, all sorts of subsidies for everything." And now, they're paying the price for that. So for the Ukrainians, I honestly think it's not an easy decision. I don't know what would be better. You hook up with, and one thing is absolutely clear: Ukraine cannot enter NATO. That's a no-go. That cannot happen.
Yeah.
Ukraine enters NATO, and that would almost be a declaration of war. So they would have to enter. They would have to enter the EU, but internationally, militarily, they could not align themselves with NATO. And how do you do that? That's not easy. Militarily, you're in sort of alliance with the Russians, and economically with Europeans. And the Ukrainians know there's no way the Russians would ever let them join NATO.
Yeah.
It just can't. That can't happen.
Yeah.
So.
Have you looked at the chart for Russia by any chance? The astrological chart?
I haven't, because I have I have a difficulty which chart to use.
Yeah. I'm looking at
because a country like, I don't know, for me it's difficult to find the right chart. For the United States, you know which chart to use, or you can have a pretty good idea.
To some extent, yes. Yeah. There are people in the astrological community that debate quite a bit about the U.S. chart, but I think you're right. For the most part, it's the July 4th chart, obviously. Mm-hmm. Some people have the time difference. Some people see the U.S. as a Gemini rising, some as a Sag rising. I use the Sibley chart, which is the Sag rising chart. I'm looking at the 1991 December 25th chart for Russia at 5:19 GMT. And it's a very interesting chart when you take into account all the Capricorn in that chart. And right now, Pluto is on the true node of Russia. It's on the true node. And then in 2014, Pluto hits the natal Uranus in Capricorn at 13 degrees. So Russia...
Robert, that's really interesting because that's opposition, pretty close to the opposition of Jupiter and Cancer.
That's right. And now we're talking United States at that point, right? I mean, Cancer is the United States. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And that natural antagonism you see in that opposition, that Capricornian Cancer opposition, no?
Yeah. Yeah, it's there. It is there. And, Russia has been going through a bit of a renaissance with Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto's in the 5th house because Russia is a Leo rising in this chart. So it's been going through this renaissance with Pluto in the 5th house and kind of a rebirth of sorts. But it's going to get quite explosive with Pluto on the Russian Uranus at 13 degrees. And in Russia, what's interesting too, Robert, about this chart is that when we look back at the Bolshevik Revolution, where Uranus was in Aries, the current chart of Russia has retained some of that Aquarian, it's almost like an Aquarian karma with Saturn in Aquarius in the 6th house. So there's some kind of sort of social reverberation that Russia has to deal with in terms of what happened during the Bolshevik Revolution with this Saturn in Aquarius, meaning that theoretically they would have to deal with these revolutionary kinds of aspects as a result of what took place during the 1900s. So perhaps what we're seeing here with Chechnya, Ukraine to some extent, is some of the Saturnian and Aquarian sort of blowback. And it's pretty much unaspected in that chart as well, which is fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what do you think about the that T-square that's coming up? What, April 4th? I think it said the aspects are tightest around April 14th.
Yeah, the big square. I have it as the 31st of April. That's what I've sort of narrowed it down to. Yeah, that's major. I think it's significant. I think it's on the world stage. I think that this could be the start of the financial fracture. It may not be the collapse that takes place, because when I looked at that chart, I saw the position of Taurus, the sun in Taurus, and I did it for 11/11 at that day on the 31st of April.
31st of April. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that puts that puts the sun right in the 12th house. I have it here somewhere. I'd have to look it up, but I think it's a significant day, and very explosive, because it is because what we're talking about is those really tight angles and those degrees that are not that far apart, and I think Jupiter is direct at that time, if I'm not mistaken, which is good. But it is. I think it's major.
Exactly. I think. Yeah. Jupiter goes direct. I think right around the 14th or the 15th, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Somewhere right around that period, it goes direct, and then because that's where it would have its tightest angle.
Let me see if I can just quickly dial that up. I have it here on my computer somewhere. That'd be good for
while you're doing that, I just wanted to bring up. I've seen this meme of 1914. Have you seen this? I saw an article in the New Yorker, one in the New York Times. It's interesting that it's kind of starting to float around out there. And it's not floating around out there for no reason. Are we seeing 1914 again?
Yep, I would agree with you. And, I think that certainly in this country there is a deep push towards some form of socialist revolution or socialist insurgence. Okay, here we go. My bad. Let me get this here. I've got this dialed up. Hold on a second. Just find this. It is April 23rd. My bad. It's April 23rd. Okay, so here we go. I have this at April 23rd. Just so everybody's watching. I don't think there is a 31st of April, by the way. April 23rd, and we have Mars at 13 degrees Libra, and that's retrograde. Right? Pluto is retrograde.
You've got Mars retrograde and in fall in Libra, no?
That's right. And then Pluto retrograde, Capricorn. It's a direct square, right? Then we have Uranus at 13, and then we have Jupiter at 13. So this is the energy that we're talking about here. And at the time that I have this at 6 a.m. on London, and I have Mercury at 29, which is the anaretic degree of Taurus, and then the Sun at the second degree, and they're conjunct. Now, they don't have any really difficult aspects. There's a sextile going on with Neptune, but that anaretic degree at 29 is a little bit tricky, especially if we're looking at it from the 12th house perspective. But again, this is just the start of the day in London, Greenwich Mean Time. But there's also a square going on with the moon, which is in Aquarius, squaring Saturn in Scorpio, which, by the way, is also retrograde. So in that day, there will be three major planets in retrograde motion. And it's the tightness, it's the degree, the 13th degree, 1, 2, 3, 3 planets, major planets, all retrograde. 13th degree, the number of the death card in the major arcana, all lined
and
up.
4 squares.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. It is a major cardinal cross. That's what we're talking about here, a cardinal cross.
Exactly.
And
2 squares. Yeah, you'll have the 3 squares and the 1 opposition. Mm-hmm.
That's right. It's a cardinal cross.
Right.
Now, there is also some really interesting positive energy for that day, too. There's a grand trine happening between Jupiter, which is a Cancer at 13 degrees, and then we take into account Chiron in Pisces at 16, and Venus in Pisces at 16, and then there's a trine to Saturn. So Saturn's trining Chiron, Saturn's trining Venus. So it's like almost, Robert, it's like these 2 realities are competing for our attention space at that point in time. So it'll be fascinating to see how this is played out. And Pluto, of course, at 13 degrees will be right on the Russian Uranus, and all these other planets will be squaring the natal Uranus of Russia at that time.
Oh, that's right. Right.
So
yeah, I think that period is interesting.
That would put Mars in Russia's 3rd house, which would be trouble at home. That would put Uranus in Russia's 9th house, which is trouble abroad. And that would put Jupiter in Russia's 11th house, which would be about some form of diplomacy and or networking. So the United States, the United States Sun would play a significant role at that time. This is going to be fascinating to see how all this is played out, especially as it relates to Russia on that day.
You know, I think the difficult part for us is we all know that this is unsustainable, that this thing is going to snap. But is it going to snap financially? Is that where the ball's going to drop? Or is it going to snap somewhere in that Lebanon, Syria, Israel? Because they just will not stop banging the drum on that. You know, today I read in the New York Times that, Hezbollah has brought those missiles from Syria back into Lebanon. No, that just doesn't seem like it wants to end.
No.
Where is it going to snap? It's difficult to tell.
Yeah, I mean, I think they apply as much pressure as they can to as many points. And and I think that when the elements are right, they will push a certain angle depending upon what's needed on a geopolitical or economic basis. Do you know about Mount Hermon in Syria?
No.
So, I was actually watching Ancient Aliens this morning, and Mount Hermon was a major point in Syria, and it's near. It actually is kind of where the Epic of Gilgamesh comes out of, right?
Sure.
So, yeah, the Book of Enoch comes out of Mount Hermon, like the Watchers and the class of fallen angels. It all gets
right. And where is it exactly?
Mount Hermon is, if you look at it on a map, it is very close to Lebanon. It's on the Syria-Lebanon border. So it is, let's see, it is, I would say, let me open this image here. It is southwest of Damascus. It's southwest of Damascus. So it's right on the Syria-Lebanon border. This is a significant mountain in terms of biblical history and mythology. And it was called Saria, which is, I guess, where we get the word Syria by the Sumerians.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this is where Epher, Ishi, Eliel, Azriel, Jeremiah, Hadaviah, and Jadiel, this is where all those families come out of, is Mount Hermon. So I think there's a reason why they keep pushing Syria. There's something about that area, and specifically this mountain, which goes all the way back to the Book of Enoch. And there's, who knows what's happening in terms of, multidimensionality there. But this is a deeply mythological and potent zone. That's why I think they keep pressing this sort of, global acupuncture point in Syria specifically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting time. And even looking at the financial markets, they've been pounding away at gold. I think last time we talked, it was like 1,400. Now we're at 1,200, and they keep pushing it down. You see equity markets going through the roof. Everything's fantastic. No, we all know at this point, this is not the 1990s. You and I, you remember working the late 1990s and the whole internet thing, and this is not the 1990s.
No.
So there's a major smoke and mirrors going on here.
There's a ton, and there's money being made in the internet, but the people that are making the money in the internet are a very small group of people, and what's being produced as a result of them making money is very different than what was being produced in the late 1990s, and a lot of it is based on surveillance and information gathering and all these 21st century commodities, which all revolve around personal information.
Yeah. One thing, for example, I was thinking about this the other day. I worked in the internet for many years, and when we bought, say, a website, how much we were paying for a user and how much revenue we could generate from that user. Well, It's simple math. You can do it in the back of an envelope. And I was realizing, who in the business would buy Twitter? If you told me, I'll sell you Twitter accounts, I would say I would look at how much revenue I can generate from those accounts and put my profit on it, and that's what I would pay for it. There is nobody in the business who would ever pay what they're paying for Twitter, for Facebook. It's completely priced ridiculously. And I realize that's what these kids do. They say, okay, we've made our money. Now we bring in Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs sells this to people who do not understand a thing about the business, and we cash in our chips.
Right.
Because if that was such a good business, why would you go public? Why not keep it?
Right.
Absolutely. I remember when someone had a good business, they kept it.
Well, yes. And what's interesting now is that the rules and regulations regarding internet businesses and venture capital funding, I think they've changed a bit since the 90s, because I remember being in the business and you got your funding and you had to spend your funding in a year. If you didn't, it would go back to the investors and you'd be SOL. And I think now, I can't be completely certain, but you've got these businesses that get their funding and they're not turning any profit. They're not turning any profit at all. And yet they continue to stay afloat. And especially in Twitter's a great example. And it becomes a Ponzi scheme. Now they go public and they get their money. But before, they had a year basically in an extremely short runway to get to some form of profitability, or else they'd be toast. They'd be shit out of luck. So something's changed, and the economic model has certainly changed to some extent, because now they can get away with it. At least in the 90s, in the late 90s, the businesses could not get away with it, and if they did, then their business would be on the rocks or be bought up for pennies on the dollar by Microsoft or AOL or whoever. So it's a very different landscape, and the type of customer or even the type of product is extremely different. It's all about information changing, exchange, personal information, identity-related stuff. It's a completely different economic scale. It's not about what you can provide to the end user. It's what the end user can provide to you, and you can then sell to somebody else for their information.
Exactly. That's what advertising has become. It's become the internet. In the internet, you're a sniper. You see where all the navigation is. So I can see where somebody has been all day, where he's made his purchases, where he hasn't purchased. All of that information. When you really know how to manipulate it, It's incredibly powerful. And I think you're 100% right. You hit it perfectly. That's what the business model is. It's not selling goofy brand campaigns to Toyota. It's nailing the guy. Boom, I got you. Because you can manipulate people really powerfully when you have enough information. People think they make decisions. They don't make a lot of decisions. If they knew how few decisions they made, well, that's part of waking up, really, isn't it?
I would say
is realizing.
I would say yes, because then you when people wake up, they realize how programmed they've become, and even when you get into like the second and third episodes of the Matrix, and Neo meets with the Sanhedrin, when the Sanhedrin basically says your waking up was just another level of illusion.
And isn't that so true?
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the really scary parts of the whole waking up process. Always when you say, "Oh my God, a little bit awake, but I'm that much more asleep than I thought I was."
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And then you're like, "Well, I thought I really had this thing nailed. Well, where do we go from here?" Right. That's when it becomes.
But you know, one of the things I've learned that maybe could help people, because I think it was a wonderful moment for me. You know that book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance?
Yep.
Fabulous book.
Yep.
In that book, he talks about that's the most creative moment, when you hit the wall. And he describes it as a strip bolt. And if you've ever tried to turn a strip bolt, it can be extremely frustrating. And he's got a strip bolt on the motorcycle, and he doesn't know what he's asked everybody. He's read every book. He's completely nothing left. And in that moment of frustration, that's your most creative moment. That's when you're close. You should be grateful for those moments. And they're difficult moments. Well, I'm not trying to say that it's easy, but that's when you're close. No? And I think that's part of the waking up process. When you you have to have those moments before you can get a little bit higher up the mountain. Yeah.
I agree totally. I concur 100%. So what do you got cooking, man? You got your book online. What else is happening with you?
Well, I had the last article on Putin in the New York Times has been pretty popular. It got published in Pravda, it's made the rounds. So it's gotten a lot of attention. And I'm working on an article on the Matrix. That's pretty interesting. I'm trying to tie in the 7 levels of the Matrix to the 7 planets. No, maybe I'll send you an email on some of my ideas about that if you could, give me a little clarification. But and I've got a new novel cooking, so everything's good. I found that for me the key is the writing. That's what keeps me going. As long as I have that going, everything else, good.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I have not had a lot of time to write lately, but I need to get back into it.
Don't you miss it don't you miss that kind of that creative? So when I stop, it kind of I feel it boiling up in me.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's a chemical reaction that happens in the brain, and then once that chemical reaction stops, you kind of go, where did those endorphins or whatever complex neuropeptides go? Right? It's like I got to get those back. So
I really liked your last piece too. I really enjoyed it. The one when you talked about your kind of opening up experience, it was a really good piece.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, let's get you back on when you in the not so distant future. We'll look at maybe when you print your article or something, and we'll get you back on here. We'll kick it around some more, and it's always a pleasure to have you on, Robert, and get into this stuff and enjoy your time in Vietnam. I'm envious.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, you take care.
Take care, man. Bye-bye.
That's Robert Bonomo, our friend in Russia. Now, theoretically, by the way, cactusland.com is his website. Sorry, I'm not completely together today. I'm getting back into the radio thing. I'm going to get there. By Wednesday, I'll have it nailed. I'll have this sucker nailed. All right? Okay, I think Sarah Nash might be on the other line. We have kind of a loosey-goosey arrangement for today. So let me just check this line. Maybe this is Sarah, our dear friend Sarah, the Cosmic Cooker. Hello?
No, I'm not Sarah.
Who is this?
Tessa.
Who is it? Oh, Tessa. Hey, Tessa.
Yeah.
Well, that's right, the 909. I should have recognized you.
Oh, well, they always forget me.
How are you?
I didn't press 1.
You didn't
talk,
press. No, I pressed.
To talk.
I pressed you. I am God in this domain. I'm God of this matrix.
Yeah, apparently so.
The blog talk.
You know, I suspect that Putin is the new anointed one to replace Obama because Obama has failed.
Could be. I don't know. I mean, there. You know, it gets really tricky, right? Because Obama theoretically spent time in Russia, right? I mean, there's that whole story about Obama being educated in Russia, which means that he would know Putin, right? Which means he would know Medvedev and all those characters. So, I don't know. It gets very convoluted.
If you or I went to Russia and came back, we'd be under surveillance and suspicion for the rest of our lives.
Well, we already are.
Yeah, I guess it wouldn't be much different. Maybe a little more blatant.
Yeah, it's true.
But
I just read that the NSA has been intercepting laptops that are being built and purchased over the internet, and then installing all this backdoor stuff.
Right.
Oh, man.
No wonder stuff doesn't arrive on time when it's shipped.
Yeah.
Well, the neighbor's cat is crying at my door to be fed. Why don't they feed him?
You go do that. I've got 10 minutes to kill before Sarah Nash calls in. So go feed your animal, and I'll play some music.
He isn't my cat.
I'll entertain the troops for a while.
Okay. Well, anyway, I did want to mention that Phil suspected that we were a lot like North Korea in that Russia had more freedom than we have, but all our news about it is propaganda.
I think Phil was right.
Could be.
I think he was right about a lot of stuff, and I would tend to agree with that. A lot of it is kind of a dog and pony show, and propaganda and illusion. But we do our best, and we soldier on, and we attempt to ground as much personal freedom and liberty as possible. Although there is the idea that there is no such thing as less free or more free. You're either free or not free. That's really the litmus for freedom. So perhaps we're all not very free, or not as free as we think we are. All right, I'm going to put you back on hold, Tessa, and go feed your cat. And Happy New Year. Happy Gregorian New Year to you.
Yeah, and Happy Year of the Horse coming up. I'm a horse.
I am a horse rising. So maybe this will be a half good year for me.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay.
All right, talk to you later. Bye-bye. That's our friend, Tessa Dick, the widow of the late Philip K. Dick, whose piece of music, well, his speech and piece of music I play on the show. Looks like Sarah Nash is going to be calling in here in a minute or two. We've been chatting on Facebook. I can do a lot of things at once. I got to tell you. I can multitask. I wouldn't say I have it down, but I'm pretty good. Why don't we do this? Let me play a little bit of music, and then I'm going to bring Sarah on. We're going to catch up with her and see what she's been up to and talk about 2014. What do I want to play? I'm tired of getting in trouble with Google about these tracks. Why don't I play a little, let's see, what do we want to hear? I could play some Susan Dehim. Let's see if I can find her here. Got so many tracks. Ba ba ba. Come on, Susan. Where's your music? Where is your music? Why don't we play Trouble Man? I like this. This is Susan Dehim in her rendition of Marvin Gaye's Trouble Man. It's memorable. Hopefully, in 4 minutes and 35 seconds, we'll have Sarah Nash on here ready to go and take you into the stretch run for the Friday FARcast. I'm Robert Phoenix, your host. Here's Susan Dehim.
Trouble man, don't get in my way.
That track always ends very abruptly. It gets me. Susan Dehim, Trouble Man. This is Robert Phoenix. You're listening to the Friday FARcast on Free Association Radio, the first show of the new year. It is the 3rd of January. If you missed the first hour, I was talking with Robert Bonomo, who is currently in Vietnam. Although he lives in Russia, he's an international man of mystery. What do you expect? He's a double Gemini. That's the way it works some days. Just to give you kind of an update as to what else is happening. If you have not checked out Gaiam TV, I urge you to look at it, taste it, sample it, experience it. It is a wonderful, and I didn't really understand Gaiam. I didn't understand how cool it was until I became a part of it and saw all the really diverse programming. Now, I'm a bit of a solipsist. Like, when I work, I just do my thing. I don't really pay attention to a lot of other things. I've kind of always been that way. When I was a kid, I wrote a lot of poetry. I didn't read a lot of poets. As a blogger, I read some blogs. I don't read a lot. As an astrologer, I don't read a lot of other astrologers. I'm sorry. The reason why is I want whatever's coming from me to be as close to as original as possible. So I tend to limit my sources that are related to what I do. Other sources, not necessarily directly related to what I do, I go as far afield as possible. So I didn't really get into Gaiam all that much, even though I knew Jay had been there for about a year. And when I actually spent time to look at the programming, it has got some incredible programming. There's content there on chemtrails. There's content there on the New World Order. There's content in there on spirituality and consciousness. It is an emporium of thoughts and paradigm-busting information. So I'm actually on there as well, some of you know, and I have a new show that's getting ready to air. It is the astrological forecast for 2014, and I shot that about a month ago. And there are going to be 3 successive shows where I do astrological forecasts for every sign. So this coming week, it will be the astrological forecast for 2014. The following week, it will be the astrological forecast for Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. But then the following week will be the next 4 signs, and the following week will be the next 4 signs. So there we go. That's what's happening on Gaiam TV, and you can go there and check it out. It's only $9.99 a month. Sign up for it. It's a cool thing. And my next guest has actually been on Gaiam TV as well, and you can see her video there with Mr. George Norrie. You know what I'm talking about. It is the Cosmic Hooker, a.k.a. one Sarah Nash. Hello, Sarah.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning.
You sound great. You sound totally great.
I just got up. You know this. You know that I'm running around my house, and I sat down and grabbed my iPad, went outside, was throwing the dog to my ball. Yeah, the ball to my see, not enough coffee yet. Yeah. So I pull up my iPad and I hit this. I go to FARcast, right?
Yep.
And the first thing I see is the Urban Dictionary, and I'm looking at it right now, and I bust it up, and Peter is looking at me like, what the heck? FARcast. This is what it says on Urban Dictionary. Are you ready?
Sure.
A RuneScape term that refers to dumbass magers or magers, I don't know, is it M-A-G-E-R-S, in PvP worlds who distance themselves from you, use prayer, and keep freezing you with ice barrage or burst.
There you go.
Here's an example. It says, nah, Bob, leave that one. He's a FARcaster.
I like that. Well, the Urban Dictionary skewers everything, so I don't feel that that terribly personal about it. But yeah, that's cool. That's interesting.
You know, every once in a while, you just got to start Googling terms. Have you ever Googled yourself?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
but not I have not Googled
things that we wouldn't say 10 years ago.
Yeah, I haven't Googled myself in a while, but yeah, I've done it. I've done it. Absolutely.
Was it good for you?
What do they call it? They call it a vanity search, right? That's what it is. It's called a vanity search. Was it good for me?
Sometimes it's a panic search or anxiety search.
Well, look, I am always cautious about what I might find, so I just rather not look under that rock. So yeah, no, it's okay. It's like every now and then. So I have a funny story though. It was I was in Boulder, and I was at a restaurant, and this was about a month ago, and I was there was a group of people. We're all hanging out. I wasn't drinking or anything. I was just having some dinner at this Mexican restaurant.
Were you at the one downstairs at the?
No, they're closing that place, by the way. But this was down in the Boulevard.
Volgograd?
No, they're closing the restaurant. There's a bar all the way down in the bottom of the Volgograd, which they're closing. That's like a subterranean thing. But no,
yeah.
Volgograd, the restaurant on both sides, the bar and the restaurant. Yeah, I've been there, and I actually really like that bar. Not to drink. I haven't had any alcohol in like 2 months now. So I've been lucid, which is an interesting experience. But yeah. So anyway, I'm at this bar, and there are a group of people. This is down on the Pearl Street Mall, and I'm having some dinner. We're sitting around. You just kind of make friends, right? And so the conversation comes up, and it's like, well, what do you do? I said, well, I always have to gauge that. It's like when people ask you what you do, what do you say?
Well, I pretty much have I have an elevator speech that goes very, very quickly, and it pretty much says that I say I like to get naked with people, and I say I'm the cosmic hooker. Here's my card, and they always like. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful experience, and I just go, here's my card, and then they do a double take, and I'm like, emotionally naked, and then I usually walk away. Yeah.
Wow, that's good. I usually have to gauge what I say to who it is I'm talking to, because sometimes people aren't really ready to hear what I do, or they can't understand it, right? So I have to. Well,
I'll be honest with you. I'll be honest. There's another thing. I mean, depending on the group you're in and where you're at, sometimes it's just not acceptable to say, well, I dabble in this and I dabble in that in the paranormal, spiritual, and metaphysical world. So in that situation, I'm a graphic designer.
There you go. Yeah, so in that situation, I'm a writer.
Very good. Yeah, you are.
Yeah, so that's my cover, right? And that's your cover.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's good. So you understand that. You get it.
I do.
So anyway,
yeah,
I'm at this restaurant. So I've already determined that I can get naked with these people, right?
Right.
Based on your definition of that. What do you do? Well, I'm an astrologer. Oh, really? Yeah. What are you doing here in Boulder? Well, I'm actually taping a TV show. And all of a sudden, people get their, raise their eyebrows. Oh, really? I said, yeah. Do you know about Gaian? Of course, most people in Boulder know about Gaian because they're a big part of Boulder and the Boulder culture. So, yeah, Gaian TV. I said, oh, really? Well, what's your name? And so I tell them my name. And this one person decided to Google me. It was really funny. They decided to Google me on their cell phone, right? Uh-huh. And they looked at their cell phone and they looked at me and they said, "You're famous." And all of a sudden it was like, really nice to meet you. All of a sudden I became a different person. It was very weird. It was very, very weird. It was like, well, it's nice to meet you too. It's like now all of a sudden I became somebody, which was really bizarre. Like I was a person before they Googled me, right? But then when they Googled me, I became a different person. Very strange, you know.
And how do you parse that?
Well, I think it's part of living.
What happens to you?
Well, it's a little embarrassing.
Why?
Number one, because
Why?
I'm just who I am, and all of a sudden now, because they Googled me, I became somebody different. I think it's ridiculous. Number one. So, and then it's like, okay, well, where do I go from this place? And I just play with it, however I need to play with it or want to play with it in that moment. And if they're nice people or fun people or open people, it can be very playful.
Sure.
And if not,
okay.
then if not, you kind of shut it down and you move on to something else, right? Mm-hmm. So, anyway, that's how, and it's only happened one time. But it was a funny kind of moment, like, because we were talking about Googling. Well, somebody else Googled me. And at that point, it was what it was. So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I had that experience when Peter came and picked me up from the airport a little while ago, and okay, I'm gonna admit something out loud, and people will take it or leave it. But one of my guilty pleasures is Taco Bell. Every once in a while, I just got to go get some fast food, and because I refuse to indulge in any other fast food. It's Taco Bell. I just got to have one of those ox-lip tacos. Yeah. So we were in the drive-through, and I leaned over Peter because he's just not he's a funny guy, and so I ordered, and when we went up to the window, the guy at the window leaned forward. He was this really sweet, just this adorable guy, and he goes, "I know who you are. You're that psychic."
Oh, really?
And it was so weird. It was so flippin' weird. He goes, "Yeah, I heard you. I heard you on the radio." And all of a sudden, all the other people that were in he's like, "You guys, it's that psychic." And he goes, "Hey, what's your name again?"
That's funny.
It's Sarah Nash. And he's like, "Yeah, you." It's a little strange. It's a little strange when it happens, and I don't get embarrassed. I get completely, absolutely squee. I want to know where and how and why, and I suppose for me it's a bit more of it's a narcissistic thing. I want to know how I sounded. Was I pleasant? Did you get upset? Were you happy? Were you pleased with what happened? The outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. And, I thought being on Gaiam was just the greatest thing in the world. And I got to tell you, I am so, I actually had to get pushed onto the stage. It was hysterical. I've been on stage since I was 5 years old.
Right.
I've been in movies, I've done television, but I've always been somebody else. Live theater is my thing. In fact, I went to school on a full-ride scholarship for theater. And this was the first time I actually had to be me. I mean, in full blazing color. And I froze. I literally froze. And, the audience claps, right, the studio audience. And George was like, okay. And he was standing there, turned around. And Tom Danheiser was behind me.
Yeah.
And he gave me a shove. He's like, "Come on, Sarah, go."
Wow.
I was frozen. I was absolutely frozen. And he shoved me out there. I suddenly had a new appreciation for actors and actresses who have to day in and day out do interviews with David Letterman, Jimmy Kimmel, those guys. And how disconcerting it is to be out there and to just be yourself because you are scrutinized.
Well, I think after a while you would get used to it. I mean, I think if you did it 3, 4, 5 times, all of a sudden you'd blend other parts of your personality, and they would come in, and it would just be kind of a natural synergistic meshing of Sarah as Sarah and all these other parts of you. By the way, your latest Facebook picture is absolutely gorgeous.
Well, thank you. That was I'd had 2 shots of tequila, and I hadn't had anything to drink since I'd been to Burning Man. And I came downstairs, and Avis turned around and she looked at me and she goes, "Oh, look at you with your Ohio makeup," because I really did. I just plastered it on my face.
Yeah.
And on a picture, you can't tell. That's the thing. When you get ready to do major photo shoots, and I've done a few recently for magazine articles, and I'll you know what? Next time we're on, I'll tell people more about what's going on with that, because there's some exciting stuff happening. But I just plastered it on my face, and it was hysterical because I was, it was New Year's Eve, and I was being silly. The thing is that picture turned out phenomenal.
Oh, totally.
And I was laughing. I actually leaned at the bottom of the stairs in my basement, and I just kind of, I was voguing. And it turned out so amazing.
Yeah.
I thought, you know what, this is going to be my cover shot for my website and other things, because I was just so flippin' happy. I am really happy. I have moved through my dark night of my soul, and I've come out at the other end, and, I have to say that the messages are coming so much more clearer and better, and I'm excited for 2014. I really am. This is going to be our year.
Yeah, good. Well, if your picture is any indication, you're ready for it. That's a keeper, that picture.
I think so, and it was completely fun and natural, and with regard to the White Light Express, I did want to talk about this real quickly.
Sure.
The White Light Express is going to, if people don't know what the White Light Express is, it is basically my ministry. I'm really paradoxical in the sense that I'm incredibly irreverent. I don't really believe in anything. What I do believe in, though, is the power of the Force. I can't really say that I believe in a God. I can't really say that I believe in any of the mythology, but what I do believe in is the power of the Force, and that there are ascended masters out there who listen to us and who care for us. So I've been using the White Light Express now as a platform for my ministry for 11 years, because I believe that when we when we pray for each other, if you want to call it prayer or meditation or focus, that it works, because we have had some miracles recently that are just phenomenally beautiful. So the White Light Express used to go once a month. We used to have a prayer grid where people would send in their prayer requests to myself and my sister Avis, and we would read them together privately in meditation, and then send out a mass request to, the powers that be out there. And Alice Bailey talks about a hierarchy in heaven or in the other worlds that makes the Sony Corporation look lame. But essentially, we pray for one another and we pray for you. So we have decided, based on what my guides have been telling me, all the voices in my head, God bless them, that we're going to begin on January 11th with the grid going 24/7. So we're going to have it in 4 separate sections. Every week is going to be, we have one for abundance, one for health, one for relationships, and one for just the world at large.
Mm-hmm.
So the prayers are going to continue. Now, we have a magazine that we're putting together, which is why I was up until 4 a.m. We're going to have a magazine that will go out quarterly. And I had an award-winning magazine years ago called the Hiss Quarterly with a group of people that worked really, really well, so I know what I'm doing. And then it moved into another magazine. We were asked to join The View from Here with Mike French, which is a phenomenal group of people. And so I was his managing editor for a couple of years, and then I just decided I was tired of being a shadow artist. and I needed to do some writing. Also, I finished my first book, and I'm editing it now, so woohoo, yay me.
Right.
And I've got an Oracle deck coming out.
Oh, cool.
So the His Quarterly, the White Light Express will have a magazine called Namaste, but it's spelled Nahmaste. I honor the crazy in you as you honor the crazy in me. Instead of, I honor the light, and it's a play on words. Come on, you were supposed to laugh. See, now we're going to have to take that to the table again. Let's have everybody send in yeah, we like this, or no, we don't like this. Maybe I'll put that in the newsletter. So for all your listeners, what I'd like to do is offer a New Year's reading. If they send me an email, I will pull their name out of a jar or something, and I will give them a free reading. So everybody, if you're listening to this, send me an email at cosmichooker@gmail.com and say that you heard me on Robert Phoenix's FARcast, and you want to be in the drawing for the free reading. And I will do that. What's today? Friday? I'll pull it out of a hat tomorrow. The magic hat tomorrow.
Cool. Well, there you go. People, my listeners love you, so I think that's an absolutely terrific fit and a nice thing for you to do. So thank you for doing that.
Oh,
and you might get about 200 queries, so be ready. Careful what you ask for, as they say.
Yeah, well, careful what you ask for when you have a reading with me. That's the other thing. I'm blunt. I'm brutally honest. Honest. Also, I'm working with Times, which is also part of Gaiam.
Oh, right,
and, yeah. I'm going to be one of their featured advisors on, if you go to Times Psychics, I think they're going to be opening that up pretty soon.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. I got certified. Literally.
Really? All right.
Yeah, I was tested. I have over an 87% accuracy rate.
That's good. That's really good. That's credible. So what am I wearing?
What did you think of the people at Gaiam?
What did I think of them? I think they're terrific.
Did they give you the tour of that place?
I think they're terrific. I think they're I mean, my exposure is limited. I'm with Jay, and I'm with the production crew, but they're young, they're professional. I think some of the people that are there now are different than the people that were there when you were there.
I heard there was a change of
they had a bit of a turnover. Yeah. So the people that I'm working with, I think they're fantastic. I think they're smart. They're on the ball. They're very synergistic. And I love Kabir. Kabir is great. And everything I've done there has been very cool. So.
Did you do the tour of the main building? Did they give you a tour of that?
Yeah. I've been. It's not like I've seen every nook and cranny, but I've been through that place a fair amount. I haven't been to the.
Aren't those crystals? Tell your listeners about the crystals in every corner of the main building out there.
Well, they don't just have crystals; they have massive crystals.
Massive.
I mean, they have like $5,000 to $10,000 crystals at key points all over that place.
These are phenomenal.
These are like sentinels. These crystals. That's how big they are.
They're pillars.
So, yeah, it's a good scene, and Yurka, who runs Gaiam, is super smart, and he just did a deal where he sold the entertainment division, meaning he sold all the DVD stuff to somebody else and pocketed $60 million. So that's.
How about that labyrinth in the backyard, or in the back?
I've not done the labyrinth. I'll ask about it next time I'm there.
Oh God, you got to.
I will check it out.
Yeah, the studios there, the people there, phenomenal. Just blows me away. If I had to work, I'd want to work there. And Jay's just amazing. Not only that, I'm living where Jay used to live. When
right.
we started talking about Cape George and Port Townsend up in Washington, he looked at me and he's like, I lived in Cape George, and I'm like, I know, and now I live there.
Yeah, I have a lot of weird synchronicity stuff with Jay too. He and I both moved from California to Washington in the same year, 1989. And he actually used to go to the restaurant that I worked at in Seattle. So he knew the restaurant that I worked at. And he and I both went to see Bill Cooper in Olympia in 1990. So Jay and I have all these weird, interesting touch points that
Wait a minute, Bill Cooper? The
Bill
dude
Cooper.
who wrote Behold the Pale Horse?
Yeah.
You got to meet him?
Well, I didn't really meet him. I went to a seminar that he did in 1990 at Olympia Evergreen College.
Okay.
At Evergreen College in Olympia, I was having my meta-political awakening at the time, and I was working at this restaurant, and it was just after the United States went into Iraq for Gulf War I. And my head was literally exploding with things. And it wasn't just my head, it was my entire consciousness was just exploding with connections and high strangeness and all kinds of stuff.
Can I ask you something real quickly? I want to bump in here real quickly. A lot of people might not know who Bill Cooper is with regard to what we're talking about, and sometimes I forget we're on the air. So Behold a Pale Horse is a must-read. If you can get your hands on a copy of this book, you have to read it. You have to read this book. It's going to change your entire paradigm. Not only, we're not talking like Robert Anton Wilson's The Cosmic Trigger. We're talking about actual facts. We're not talking about just, gee, this might happen or this should happen or this is how I feel. We're talking about a situation in it's more than just a conspiracy theory. It's a beautiful it's an introduction into what's really going on out there. And speaking of what's really going on out there, I don't know if you've talked about this or not, but somebody sent me a video a couple of days ago. And if I'm way off track, tell me to shut up and we'll talk about this some other time. But it terrified me and it made me angry with regard to the Boston massacre, the marathon, being a false flag, not being real, that it was all a setup, it was planned, and of course people did get hurt, but these videos that this person sent to me, I kind of sat back because I'm super skeptical. All right.
Right.
With everything I hear, everything I see, everything I feel, it's people tell me, I need you to come clean my house. I have a ghost. I'm like, okay, let's go. It's so, and there's so many, and like chemtrails. I always thought people were just like out of their minds and nuts with chemtrails. I'm like, come on, please. There's nothing going on because it would affect them too, blah, blah, blah. Like, why would they? Okay, when I was in Joshua Tree, I experienced something with regard to chemtrails, and now I'm pissed. Oh, my God, guys, I'm so pissed. What are they doing to us? I had an experience that just blew my mind. I sat talking about sitting next to somebody in a bar. This guy was a Native American, but he was a scientist, and he just laid it all out for me in a way that just I knew that he was not telling me lies. So when I got these videos with regard to this marathon, the horrible, tragic events that happened were all a Hollywood setup, and I started reading about that. This was my latest project. I'm like, why? Why would they do this?
Well, I congratulations. I'm glad you're experiencing this and coming around to it. We've been talking about this for months. It's like we have been...
Oh, I've had my head in the sand for months.
Yeah, we've been dissecting and pulling apart Boston and Newton and Sandy Hook, on a consistent basis.
Well, I knew about the Sandy Hook thing with you, but...
Well, it's all part of the same operation. It's really interesting. there's a new commercial out with Verizon. And if people don't know about Verizon, Verizon was the first cell phone company to actively interact with the intelligence agencies and providing them a very quick and easy and efficient backdoor to their phone network. It was basically they were hardwiring out of their server rooms and straight into the NSA and any other group that wanted that information and probably could pay for it. So Verizon has had its foot in the door from day one, and it's no coincidence that they're the most ubiquitous network as well. But they have a commercial out now, and you can watch it. It starts off with a guy who has, he looks like just your average Joe, and it's a series of selfies that happen very quickly, almost like time lapse, but his identity changes through the commercial. And by the end of the commercial, he becomes this, like, he goes from your average Joe to like this long-haired, headband-wearing, rocker. And the T-shirt that he's wearing... Oh,
yeah, okay, I have seen it. Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay, the T-shirt that he's wearing says PSYOP on it. PSYOP. PSYOP being short for psychological operation, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's what we experienced with Sandy Hook and Boston and any other events, really, in the post-9/11 sort of matrix. And what that T-shirt is basically saying, it's really hidden in plain sight.
Everything is.
That reality is a psyop. He's wearing a T-shirt that says psyop, and we are supposed to look at that. Many people won't understand what that says. Many people won't even notice that he's wearing a T-shirt that says psyop, and the ones that do will say, "Aha, here they are again." They're basically telling us straight up front that these things are
and everything is let those who have eyes see, let those who have ears hear. And this is what this gentleman told me. I told you I went to Joshua Tree right before the holidays, right after Thanksgiving and right before Christmas, to visit my mother. And Joshua Tree is my power place. It's one of the places where I go to recharge my metaphysical battery, and I'm so glad I did. And I spent quite a bit of time hiking around the mountains in the back of where the Joshua Tree National Monument is. Have you been?
I have been to Joshua Tree. Yes, I have. Mm-hmm. It's my heart and soul are there. And the Dingley May Institute is there. And I'm very, very fond of the trustees who run the place. And Edwin Dingle was just an incredible person with regard to his studies in Tibet and his breath work. Well, I've been running around that place since I was 7. I mean, this is my home away from home, and one of these days, God willing, I will be able to open up a small center there, a healing center, and that's my dream. But I sat at the Crossroads Cafe. I ordered some food to take home to my mother and I, and this lovely, lovely, lovely man sat down next to me, and I almost felt like it was just all planned. Somehow, I don't know, but he sat down next to me and he ordered a glass of wine. I was drinking coffee. He turned to me and he said, "So what do you do?" Literally. Right.
Yeah, it happens like that. It really does. And he was looking at my tablet, my iPad, and I was clicking around on it, and he's like, "So what do you do? And what is that? And how's that working for you? We lost our computer, blah, blah, blah." And boom. We just went into it. Mm-hmm. And he told me some things that, this reality, I'm not entirely even sure, Robert, that this reality is reality.
No,
I'm sure that we are not just avatars, that these flesh vehicles that we're inside that break down and, take in energy and expel energy, I'm not entirely certain that what we are experiencing is real. And, I don't want to sound like I'm completely, well, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm insane anyways. But the bottom line is that I'm having this this discussion with myself with regard to, well, maybe it is a holographic universe. Maybe this is just a flippin' video game. 3 steps to the left, you're eaten by a grue. Okay, next.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are so many overlapping realities. I had an experience in my kitchen where Sylvia Brown came to me, and she was looking at me, and she did not know she was dead. And I was telling her, dude, you're dead. And she's like, I can't be. I need to talk to my daughter. I didn't even know she had kids. I mean, I really didn't even know anything about her. And she goes, you're so much nicer than the other you. And I'm like, what? What? She goes, oh, yeah, you're so much nicer than the other you. And, I guess in some other reality I knew her and we hung out, or I don't know. I don't.
Well,
and this was the first time that I was like, okay, yeah, there's something going on here.
Yeah. Well, we only have about 5 minutes left, and I want to just share a story that's related to that. And when I was 30 years old, and I was hanging out in actually Olympia, I had this experience where I was in a very deep dream sleep state, and I remember passing through this plasma of energy. And on the other side of this plasmatic kind of current, I realized I was living another life somewhere else. And I knew all the details to it. And then it was really strange. And then I stepped back through, and then it must have been about a week later, I went and saw this psychic in Seattle. And she told me that I was actually living 2 lives in 2 separate places. One was an old guy living in Philadelphia, and the other was a young girl living in the Midwest who was very poor. And the old guy from Philadelphia was getting ready to pass. And I thought it was very strange, but I thought it was interesting. I started to have all these weird synchronicities about Philadelphia right after that. And strange kinds of synchronicities about my name. It was one of these times in my life where I didn't have any real any kind of moorings. I just come out of a marriage. I had no place to live. So when you're in those kinds of free-floating places, strange things can occur. But I took note of this. And I guess it was about 6 years later, and I was traveling around the country doing tarot readings, and I wound up in Taos, New Mexico. And when I was in Taos, I met this woman who had this gallery, and she invited me to this Akashic reading thing that was taking place at this gallery. So I showed up. I was really in Taos for about 24 hours, and I go to this thing, and I'd been reading the Monuments of Montauk, Adventures in Synchronicity by Peter Moon. And the Philadelphia experiment shows up a lot in this book. And I'd been reading in August.
Okay, say that one more time because I need to write that down. I mean, I could go back and look at it, but I want to write it down one more time.
I think it's Monuments of Montauk, Adventures in Synchronicity. Anyway,
okay,
I was reading.
Who's the author?
Peter Moon, Moon.
Okay, all right, got it. Go ahead. Go.
I'm reading, and there's a date in August, which is very important to the whole Philadelphia experiment story. And I realize that I'm reading on the same day that this date is taking place. I went, wow, this is a really interesting synchronicity. So I wound up 2 days later at this Akashic session in Taos. And I raised my hand, and the woman says, she calls on me. And I said, well, I had this really strange experience. The other day I was reading this book about the Philadelphia experiment, a very important date that takes place. It took place 2 days ago, and it was that date. I'm reading this story, and she says, well, there's a reason why you read that. And the reason why is because you have 2 alternate lives. One is a young girl in the Midwest, and the other is an older man who's just left his body in Philadelphia. He was an engineer that was part of the Philadelphia experiment, and you were a part of it. Now, here is another person corroborating the same information that somebody had told me 6 years earlier about these 2 alternate lives. So, to your point, reality is very, very strange and a lot less I don't know, understandable than we can wrap our hands around at times.
Yeah, and not only that, time is a construct that is I can't, time is one of those things where it's very, very difficult. Time makes no sense in other dimensions.
Right.
The time is something that we could go on and on about that, but we one of the things that I learned about spiritual response therapy is that we can be in several different quote-unquote portals. My teacher and mentor, Robert Bonomo, called them, and the name Robert, by the way, is huge for me. There's synchronicities with the name Robert that they're mind-blowing. But spiritual response therapy tells us that we can be in several different portals. And
right.
I personally have worked with people when I began using a pendulum appropriately, began to understand that people who are often just absolutely out of their minds crazy can be pulled back from a lot of these different portals, and they will have lucidity as long as they maintain some equanimity with regard to how they move through their life or lives. So I don't know.
Yeah.
We could talk more about that, but I know you got to wrap it up. So
I do. We're actually in the podcast now, but thanks for coming on and taking such a short notice to get in here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you. Thank you always. Always thank you.
So, Sarah
Happy
Nash,
New Year, everyone.
What's your website again? Spiritual emergence.com?
Oh, no. Cosmic Triage.
Cosmic Triage. My bad. Cosmic Triage.
Yeah, or Cosmic Hooker. It's all good. I love you guys. Bye.
Bye, Sarah. Take care. That's Sarah Nash, the Cosmic Hooker, saying goodbye. So if you're listening now, you are actually listening to the podcast version. Thank you for tuning in. I'd like to thank Robert Bonomo for being a part of the show as well. And I'll be back on Monday will I be back on Monday? I'm going to be in Boulder on Monday. You may not see me again until next Friday. I'll have to tell people on the network that. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to discern what's possible. Happy New Year to everybody. Thank you for all of your support near and far. And we will get through this, and we will get on the other side. And when we do, we will raise our glasses and toast one another for the hell of the ride that it's been. And perhaps we can create something very unique and novel as a result. Until then, take care of yourselves.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.